There are already a ton of videos on how to cook ugali, but most of them leave out what I consider important information. Ugali is one of the first things you learn how to cook in Kenyan cooking. So I'm a little bit surprised that there aren't more people talking about the tips that I'll be sharing in this video. Hi, my name is Eric Mahasi and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're talking all about ugali. Ugali is our staple food here in Kenya and it's really easy to make. It only takes two ingredients, water and maize flour. A lot of the videos I've seen on this topic do a great job of teaching you how to cook ugali, but they usually leave it at that. In this video, I'll be showing you how I make ugali, and I'll also be sharing with you 7 tips on how you can make the most out of it. I'll be showing you how you can store it, how to use leftovers, and lots more. At the end of the video, I'll also be sharing with you 4 bonus points that will help you cook the perfect ugali every time. Like I said, ugali is really easy to make. You'll start by bringing some water in a sufuria up to a boil. Once it's boiling, add in your maize flour while stirring with a wooden spoon or a mwiko. You'll keep doing this until your ugali is at a consistency to your liking. At this point, keep stirring and working out the lumps in the ugali. After a few minutes, your ugali will start to firm up, at which point you can begin shaping it. Give it a few more minutes and your ugali will be ready. Now onto the tips, and the first one is don't use too much flour. The cardinal rule in the kitchen is you can always add, but you can't subtract. And that applies here as well. If you use too much flour, your ugali is going to be very dense, and you definitely don't want to feel like you're eating concrete. Tip number 2 is on how you can tell when your ugali is ready. So there are 2 ways, and I guess you should use both of them. The first one is going to start smelling a little bit like popcorn, and that's usually a good sign. And the second one is the bottom of the sufuria you're using will start to take on a really nice brown color. The third tip is if you're having a hard time mixing your ugali, especially when you're trying to shape it, and you're finding that it's sticking a little bit too much to your mwiko, one thing you can do is just run it under the tap, add a little bit of water to your mwiko, and that will help you shape your ugali much easier. On the topic of shaping it, there are 2 techniques that I use when I'm shaping my ugali. I know there are several, but these are the ones that I use. The first one is a bit more advanced, so you definitely want to be careful, otherwise you can end up with your ugali on the floor. You're going to turn your sufuria upside down and use your mwiko to flip your ugali the right side up on your plate. Like I said, it's a bit more advanced, takes a bit of practice. I mess it up sometimes too. The other technique I use, which is a lot more beginner friendly, is to just dump your ugali from the sufuria right onto the plate and then shaping it from there. The next tip has to do with storing your ugali. So ugali stores really well in the fridge. You can keep it there for a few days, but if you plan on not eating it within the next few days, you can also chuck it in the freezer and it will stay there basically indefinitely. The next tip is about recycling your ugali or reusing it. If you had stored your ugali in the freezer, just make sure to thaw it out and then cut it up into small chunks, as small as you can, and put it into the water that you're going to use to cook your next ugali. Just cook your ugali the same way, but don't add as much flour as you normally do. Now the last tip is, if you don't want to cook a whole fresh ugali, You can still reuse the ugali leftovers by microwaving them. Just make sure that if your ugali was in a huge chunk or in a huge lump in the fridge, cut it up into thinner slices, and that will help it warm up evenly in the microwave. Earlier in the video, I mentioned 4 bonus points that will help you cook the perfect ugali every time. And the first one is the quality of flour. Ugali flour that you buy in the supermarket versus the one you buy in the posho mill have different characteristics, and they're going to behave differently in the kitchen. So keep in mind that you might need to use different amounts depending on the kind of flour that you're using. The second one is heat regulation. You want to keep an eye out on the level of heat that you're using to cook your ugali. What I do is put the heat on full blast when I'm boiling the water to get it there real quick, and then after that I turn the heat down a little bit. Everyone's cooker is a little bit different, but I recommend that you use a medium to medium low heat when you're cooking your ugali. This ties very well into the third point, which is your sufuria. If you have a heavy bottomed sufuria that's really thick, that's going to cook your ugali differently compared to someone who has a very light and a very thin sufuria. So for example, if your sufuria is very thin and very light, you want to make sure you keep your heat quite low, because if the heat is too high, it could end up maybe cooking your ugali faster than you really want to, or if you're not careful, it could even burn. The last tip is the amount of flour and water. This is a ratio that you want to make sure you nail, because if one of those components is off, you're not going to get a good result. I personally don't follow exact measurements for cooking ugali. I just listen to what the ancestors say, and when they say it's enough, my child, I know I have enough flour. But you want to develop this skill. It's a skill you develop. You learn over time the correct amount of water to flour when cooking for a certain number of people. There are some people who say ugali is boring, but I think they're missing the point. Yes, ugali on its own is kind of bland. I'll be the first one to admit it. But that's what makes it a great vehicle for more savory foods like beef, fish, pork, and vegetables. I'd like to know what you guys think. Is it bland or is it not? You could let me know in the comments, or you could vote on this poll that I'm doing here on my Instagram. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time.